So I'm going to call this meeting to order. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Everybody got their mic on?
Yep.
All right. Okay, FOIA notification has been published. Anybody want to make any comment about the agenda? Okay, we're going to go to, actually, the meeting minutes of July 1st. Any corrections, modifications, additions? Okay, without hearing any objections, the minutes are thereby approved. All right, this is the time at the meeting for any citizen comments that are not related to agenda items. I have one comment request here, and I assume this is not related to anything on our agenda.
Right.
All right, would you please come up, please, and,
That comment is in reference to the Ramsey.
would you please introduce yourself and your
No problem.
location?
My name is Joyce. My last name is Ham.
Okay,
The comment that I want to make is in reference to the Ramsey Jennings project that they are considering bringing back before this board sometime in October. I was told that it would be here today, but apparently it is not on the agenda today. So if it is on the agenda in the future, our plan to deny that, for the people in our community, we do not need houses at $300,000 per home in our community. And we're standing firm that that should not happen, and we would like for you all to vote in our favor.
all right. Are you talking about the item on the consideration of the ordinance amending the zoning map located on Highway, Okatee Highway?
No,
This is in
no, this is in Burton.
Yes.
We were told that that was gonna be on the agenda for today, but apparently it's not.
Okay,
So,
thank you for your
You're
comments. Rob, do you want to make any mention of that one?
This was a rezoning, and I can't remember if it was March or April, when the planning commission looked at it. It went, the planning commission recommended denial. It went to the land use committee, who recommended denial, and then it was turned down at first reading of county council. The applicant, one of the comments we made had to do with the place type overlay. They did this
Okay.
as a conventional rezoning.
Mm-hmm.
The applicant has expressed that they want to come back with an application that would be a place type overlay change, a zoning amendment. And it's my understanding they've dropped off a packet today in our office, which is the deadline for the October meeting. So we haven't even looked at it, or, we have to determine that it's complete and ready to move forward.
Gotcha.
But I had mentioned to Joyce that I would make sure that when we send out letters for the public hearing, once that is on the agenda, we would send it to her, and then,
Great,
so.
thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for the update. Thank you, Ms. Ham. Well, we can certainly do that, yeah. We can just take a second to welcome Ms. Tabernack to our meeting. Well, thank you for being here. All right, let's get on with the agenda. First item on the agenda is consideration of ordinance amending the zoning map located on, properties located on Okatee Highway from T2 rural to neighborhood and mixed use. I understand that the applicant, Mr. Johnson, is here and is asking us for a further deferral. Would you like to come up to the podium and introduce yourself and state your
I'm Barry Johnson, the applicant for this group of properties, and thank you all for considering our request tonight. We have been working with staff and had some conversations with staff, and we've been looking at a workforce housing component, even though that's not required under the code, but we think it may be valuable to the county and the public. And we have also recently been in talks with some people about meeting a need, particularly in our community, which has such a military heritage. I mean, I grew up here, so I know about this military town. To provide some housing component, a significant part for disabled American military veterans. And we need some additional time to pull this together. We're already working with some folks in government entities that deal with that and some non-government entities. We plan to bring in folks like you may be familiar with them, the Operation FOV over in Ridgeland that has a great ministry there for veterans. Bring in some state-level veterans people and certainly the county's local veterans office and other people. And we want to work with staff and see if we can come up with something that can work and be a benefit to everybody. And so we would appreciate very much the Planning Commission's indulgence in carrying us over till December. I've discussed that date with Rob Merchant, and we feel like we can get our ducks in a row in time to get them formally what they need for the 30 days in advance and everything. So happy to answer any questions if you're interested.
Any questions anybody would like to ask of Mr. Johnson?
What is the status of the parcel that you asked the town of Bluffton to annex? And they have a requirement, obviously, that you know, which would mandate a certain amount of housing to be put to low income. Where's that at?
Town of Bluffton refused to annex the property. In informal meetings that we had twice with the then mayor-elect, now mayor, and a council, then and now council member, my client offered on that parcel to make it 100% workforce housing. And it didn't show in the public record, it's probably what everybody has had some access to, rather than the 20% that's actually in their town code. We offered 100%. And they said that they would not be willing to do that even at 100%. Because it would require an upzoning, and they would rather do without the workforce housing, which would have included technically an affordable housing element and a workforce housing element, the two technical definitions. They'd rather do without it than to upzone 1 acre of land, either in the town of Bluffton or to get there.
Was it 1 acre? I for some
was 8
reason, I thought
acres.
it was the parcel that was under 8 acres, like 7.
No, it was 8.73 acres.
It's 8.73.
Yes,
So it's
ma'am.
not 1 acre, it's 8.73.
No, I said, but they told us that even if it was 1 acre, they wouldn't do it.
And what message did you take from that you're now coming back to the county with a sort of counter proposal to offer workforce housing and, injured veterans housing? I guess I don't see the logic here.
Well, the logic is simply that we think it makes a product that would be appealing to the public, may not be appealing to you and maybe not to the commission.
I
know.
don't speak for the whole commission.
Yes, ma'am, I know. But we think it would make an appealing project that the county ultimately, and county council, I guess, ultimately would make whatever decision it might make if this continues. And with the military history and heritage here, we thought maybe this would set a good example, my clients did, for other projects to try to help our disabled veterans, rather than something you see on TV and they want you to send $11 a month to. It could be happening here in our community. Now, it may be that Beaufort County shares the same notion that the town of Bluffton leadership seems to have, that if there's upzoning of anything, then perhaps Beaufort County Council does not want to see any workforce housing to get there. And that's a bridge we haven't crossed yet, and we'd like to work our way to that bridge and see what the result is.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
I've got just one quick question. After I read through this, went back through and read the agenda when this was addressed, just to make sure I understand, at first you were going to go from T2R to C3 for 50 mansion flats and then some commercial with some dwelling units above. Was that correct? That was the initial proposal?
Partly correct.
200.
And let me speak to clarify.
Okay,
We were going to go from T2R to mixed-use commercial,
Right.
which is the same thing as C3.
right.
Because that's what's been indicated in the comprehensive plan for the county, in the 2010 comp plan, and is now indicated in the 2040 comp plan. The application process does not require submission of any particular arrangement or mix or style of potential project improvements. Staff asked us if we would provide a potential example of what a form of development might look like. Not the form, but a potential form. And so that was created for that purpose. But it doesn't necessarily represent where we're headed in terms of the actual finished product, because it's too early in your process, in the county's process,
Right.
to really get to that place. What was presented, I don't remember the number, but it did include some mansion-style houses. It included walkability corridors, pedestrian shed type things. It included a mixed-use retail center that would contemplate not only commercial, but the mixed use in the upper floors, and would provide opportunities for retail and restaurant and activities of that sort on a small scale in that area, which probably would be appealing to the folks across the street from Sun City, some of whom we've talked to and find that notion very appealing. So they don't have to go far and wide on 170 to get away from the 2 or 3 restaurants that are within easy reach of all of Sun City, all 8,000, whatever it is.
Okay.
Over there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
So this specific
Thank you.
action that you're taking, Ms. Johnson, just a
Oh,
second.
I'm sorry. I thought
This
you were
specific
excusing me.
action you're taking to amend the application to include some additional or some different aspects so that you can come back,
Yes,
but it's still going to be a zoning map request
that's correct.
change.
Has to be for
Okay.
where we are.
Are you okay with this, Mr. Merchant? With the deferral?
Yes, I spoke with Mr. Johnson about this, and we offered one condition, that if this is deferred to December, we want to make sure that the public hearing is advertised, because it's been a long, time since the original public hearing. And so that way, the community or interested residents can come out and be part of the
Okay.
process. So.
I may say we're fully supportive of that.
Yes, I see that in your letter that you
Yes.
submitted to us, and we appreciate that.
Question?
Did you have a question,
Yeah,
Glenn?
for Rob.
Yes.
You didn't really specifically say what Bluffton, the reasoning behind their denial. Will we get that kind of information if we go to this meeting, defer until December?
What I could do, we met with their staff prior to, I think this was back in May or June, because we wanted to, speak with them anyway. We try to coordinate every time there's a major rezoning. And that's where we got the information we put in the staff report, that they had mentioned the issue about affordable housing. So we want to revisit that, so when this comes forward in December, if this, as they're requesting, if we find out any additional information about that, we could update.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but it sounds like, what I'm hearing from Barry Johnson is that this is based on a conversation with an elected official.
And the mayor-elect.
And the
Who was
mayor-elect.
also a council member at that time.
Yeah,
Had not become officially mayor.
yeah.
And staff was not present at this conversation.
Yeah, and so I don't know if there's any record of that, it's not,
Okay.
so.
Right.
Just seems a
I could
little,
ask the current mayor if he would speak to staff about it.
Could you speak up at the podium if you, next time, so that people listening can hear?
I'm sorry. I could certainly request the current mayor of Bluffton if he would speak to his staff and confirm that, if that's significant to you and to,
It is significant, yes.
okay.
Uh,
I can certainly
there-
make that request.
There was another deficiency in the application that I see the school district hasn't made any comment. I'd be interested in the impact on the schools. So that's of importance as well.
They were given notice, but I don't think they've said anything.
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, we did reach out to them.
Mhm.
We gave it a letter.
I think it's really important because one of those roadways that was labeled number 5 on the map literally dumps into the roadway for River Ridge Elementary.
Exactly.
So there's I think, a
And
tremendous
whatever
potential
plan
for
is there
conflict.
would probably have connectivity to
Yeah.
the academy.
Well, it wasn't in the plan that I read. I mean, I'm not an architect or a designer, but I didn't see that as being resolved.
We don't have an agreement with the Board of Education for that, if that's what you're asking.
Sure, I'm asking that.
Okay.
I'm also asking, what about the traffic study, to my
Mhm.
reading, didn't address that specific problem? And sort of back up on those internal roads
Right.
where the map indicated connectivity.
I'm going to speak from memory here, so forgive me if
Well,
I'm
you might
off.
want, you might want to hold off on that. I mean, I think what we're saying is that some of the shortcomings of the current application on the TIA, school notification, Bluffton's involvement and understanding,
Right.
we're going to be looking for those particular issues
Those are very helpful for me to
when it comes in
understand.
December.
I don't
Is that
think the
correct?
county
Yes.
gave us the indication that that interconnection with the school was important for purposes of the guidance of the TIA. But we can readdress that with the county traffic engineer and with the consultants who did the report.
All right,
I don't think that's a
Yes,
big
sir.
problem at all.
all right, any other questions? All right, there is a,
I have a quick question about process, and maybe
Process.
Rob could answer it. Rob, this request was deferred in July. I just sort of
Yes.
want a timeline here.
Yes.
And I myself voted against the deferral, so
Mm-hmm.
I was the one of the 6-1 vote. So what I'm concerned about is that we're setting a precedent for what Mr. Johnson wrote in his email to you about remand. That is, we
It's
have
not
no more
remand.
remand
But
with
that-
the staff.
it's not,
That's not what's
It's
being
not correct.
requested. This
this is
is,
a deferral.
they deferred to September, they're asking to defer to December.
They deferred to September and October, I believe, were the emails that we got.
No, September. The original request is for September, the subsequent request today is for December.
Yeah.
And they have they have the right, according to the CDC, section 7.4.60, for a deferral application, and this is what they have submitted in writing.
Yeah.
That's my question. Is it a 2-month window? Is there a window there or not?
No, there is no limit. They can move it out. This is their request. There is a limit if we request it. We
Yeah.
could do it one time. But there is no time limit. If you
Yeah,
wanted to delay it for another 6 months, he could do that. He'd have to consult with the planning director, see if that's still applicable, if they still want to do that, see if the conditions had changed such that there'd be some additional requirements. But no, there's no limit.
there's no clock ticking here.
There's no clock ticking
Thank
here.
you, that's.
No, but I mean, and that's why we place that condition, because what we don't want to have is, somebody came at the July meeting that was very interested in this project, and then the public hearing continues in December, they're
Yeah.
not getting notifications. We want to make sure that everyone who was
Yeah.
notified
Yep.
for the July meeting is notified when this comes back
Yeah,
in
I'm glad you
December.
made that point. There were a number of people in the audience in July who wanted to speak, and we weren't afforded that opportunity.
Mhm.
So we want to be clear that when they come back, that they'll have that opportunity.
Okay.
And Rob, that will be in writing to those folks who signed up, or how does the county do?
We would notify them the same way we notify, so, we put a notice in the paper, we contact people within 500 feet of the proposed rezoning.
Okay. Any other questions, Rob?
And post a property.
Sure,
John?
yeah, thank you.
Just for the sake of the record, the letter talks about continuance. This is in fact a deferral. I know we had this conversation.
Yes,
Last
and
time.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
I just picture taking the AICP exam again and then getting,
Yeah,
I
that-
get really confused on those. and
I
know
think
that-
that's more appropriate to the court system, remanding and
Yeah.
continuances than us. It's a deferral according to our CDC.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right.
All right, any just further discussion amongst ourselves that you'd like to offer, anyone? If not, do I have a recommendation for accepting the deferral or not?
So recommended, we're so moved. Second.
Second? Any other discussion?
Rob, do you think that there is going to be fruitful conversation about what's going forward? I mean, we've been on this since July.
So this is my understanding, the applicant has indicated that there's going to be some affordable housing component that is going to have to, that cannot occur through the zoning change, but it could occur through a development agreement. And so as this goes to the planning commission, what I would recommend is if the applicant is providing that information, the planning commission could say, well, and this is just a hypothetical, we could support this if the applicant follows through with what they've indicated they're going to do with affordable housing, using the development agreement as the instrument to do that. Then it kind of puts the ball in council's court that they have kind of a conditional recommendation from council that if, we support this if council backs us up with a development agreement and
You mean our recommendation to council?
yes. So that's kind of how I see this moving forward if.
At our December meeting.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Further discussion?
Sorry.
okay, yeah.
Rob-
I always
Rob,
get
in your
nervous when-
conversation-
There's always someone.
I know one of the issues at the original public hearing had to do with, and these are my words, kind of a lack of addressing the issue of the Hamlet Police Base overlay in
Mhm.
terms of the plan. In subsequent conversations, is it your anticipation that we'll see more of that
Yeah,
as
and this
part of what
is,
comes back in December, or?
this is something really for the applicant, but one possibility is we have a council and planning commission level change that can affect what we call place type overlay, which is, basically choosing the transect zones that would, create whether it's a village or hamlet place type. The one thing that a development agreement could do, and we did this in the case of Pepper Hall, the Graves property, is you can use a development agreement if they're proposing to do a straightforward rezoning to C3, they could use a traditional community plan, which is a staff level way of applying transect zones to that community in implementing the place type. And that could be something also that is, that the development agreement could put into place. So that's one way it could be addressed, but I think that that's a legitimate concern of the planning commission because that was one of the issues that was brought up by staff. So, and I mean, I haven't seen the revised submittal, so I don't know what form it's going to take, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second for consideration of the ordinance amending the zoning map amendment located on Okatee Highway from T2 rural to neighborhood mixed use to be deferred for decision or recommendation until the December 2nd, I believe it's the December 2nd, Planning Commission meeting. All those in favor of that motion, raise your hand. All those who not in favor of that motion, raise your hand. Well, this is interesting. 1, 2, 3, 4 opposed, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 4 equal. All right.
So we've learned from the ZBOA that is a failed motion.
Yeah, it is. Do I have another motion? what further action would you like to take? Recommendation would you like to make?
Well, we were instructed to go back to the original staff report in July, which I did, and then Ms. Forbes said, if you decide not to grant the delay, then you must rule on the original actions in July in the staff report. So I think the staff report stands there, for all the reasons we've mentioned tonight and mentioned at that meeting. That is, the only thing that's new, I mean, access isn't new, number of houses aren't new, number of, 24,000 square feet or whatever it is of commercial isn't new, that's all the same. The only thing that's different, to my knowledge, is the unknown workforce housing component and unknown military housing component, which the town of Bluffton, in rejecting their own mandated, requirement for that, has said, no. And I think as Mr. Johnson said, they wouldn't want to, on the 8 acres, they wouldn't want to annex 1 acre. So, I mean, to me, it's fairly straightforward. Now, I'm not saying that Mr. Johnson doesn't have another bite at the apple, but I think it would have to be rather changed and not just working through the staff or us. I don't know. I mean, tell me more.
I'll just offer this. If the planning commission were to, let's say, recommend denial of the application, then it would go, they still have the right to go to the land use committee.
Of course.
And, so whatever they're proposing to do, which I don't have much detail, then that negotiation or that conversation would happen at the land use committee. The advantage of deferring would mean that the planning commission gets to weigh in on this, more of the specifics of what they're proposing. So I would just offer that as staff. I'm not really prepared to take a position there, but, I think it's up, the planning commission should be aware, if they vote to recommend denial, it still lives and it moves on to council, so.
If it's substantially changed from what we ruled on or we recommended, would we have another bite at that? In other words, would it?
Yes, and that's kind of what's being proposed is to come back with changes to the
Now, does it
application.
change anything in terms of coming back at a later date? Is there a 6-month period of standing time between the denial of this application and another submission?
So the way it reads, that 6 months is if the applicant withdraws after a public hearing is advertised. The 1 year is basically, that is council denying rejecting a request. So if council at first reading turned down this request, they couldn't come back for another year with the same request. So those are the two.
Gotcha.
Is it council
timeframes.
denial or land use denial?
Council.
Council.
Okay,
That's, land use still just makes the recommendation.
Right.
okay.
So the political pathway is that Mr. Johnson and his clients could go to land use,
With a negative recommendation.
correct? And that land use could say, we have a different recommendation for council. We agree, we want to preserve and promote what's going on at council, right?
I
Or
mean,
they can do whatever they want.
yeah.
That's their recommendation. Right, but I'm just asking about I understand the risk that Mr. Johnson is facing. And not only what you just said, a year, but the fact that, I don't know, a group of homeowners or residents in the area could say, Beaufort Planning Commission, turn this down, and here are all the traffic reasons why, and X, Y, and Z.
Mhm.
So that's we're both sort of in a game of chicken here a little bit.
Okay.
Well, as I understand it, if it goes forward, even with our denial recommendation, and they go to the land use, what I would expect would happen, there would be a different application or amended application between now and that. and that the amended application would be significantly different, that it would be sent back to the planning commission.
And all of this is speculation because I don't know, but it's my understanding that what the applicant is looking at is a draft development agreement that would accompany. So it would be, we have this rezoning application to change the zoning to C3. In addition, we have this proposal to build so many workforce or affordable units and would like to talk to council about a development agreement. And so
Okay.
that's what I understand the situation to be. And then it's really up to the land use committee and how they want to move forward at that point.
Gotcha.
But I would be, as staff, bringing to them our staff report and, let them, the recommendation of the
Okay.
planning commission.
So we have two things we can do, as I understand it. We can rule on a denial on the original application, which we know is going to be amended. Or we can ask for a reconsideration of the deferral vote and take a second vote.
I just,
don't know.
and I'll go with the reconsideration, but what I want to understand is what's the advantage for us to deny them at this point? I mean, essentially, if they go to land use without coming back through here, unless there's a substantial change, we don't see it again and can't really, there's gonna be something going on. I wanna make sure we see it. And I think that's an important aspect of it. So I'm going to go with the reconsideration on this motion.
John?
Well, two things. I think what I'm hearing is that if we were to deny, we're denying based on what was presented at the original public hearing.
That's correct.
And that's what would move forward. So we don't have the opportunity to share any changes that they may be considering. I guess from my viewpoint, I thought we were fairly clear at that original public hearing as to the things that we had concerns with. And that's what I was assuming the applicant was going to at least attempt to be addressing with staff. And we haven't had the opportunity to see what the result of that conversation is. And that was really the reason why I was voting to move forward with the deferral, is because I assume there are other things that are going to be different than what we heard at the original hearing, that we haven't heard tonight. We may be assuming there's not a lot of change, but we don't know that. And so by deferring, at least we get the opportunity to hear that they've looked at other things. If they haven't, then at that point, we can take action to either approve or deny, but at least that gives us the opportunity to hear what they've discussed with staff and what changes, if any, they're proposing.
Correct.
So is it appropriate, the motion is to move reconsideration?
Absolutely.
Maybe not necessarily. I agree with what you said about the reason for our initial deferral. But from what we've heard tonight, not much has happened other than we heard the town of Bluffton is not for this at all. So, without knowing their reasoning or logic, I'd say we back them up and say, who are we to go against their wishes, so to speak, and deny it,
Well,
the
I
deferral.
personally believe that's a speculation. I don't know that they won't be commenting at the
Agreed.
next,
That's
at the
yeah.
next amendment of it.
Yeah.
And I definitely think this issue needs to come back before the commission. There is a risk that if we deny the application, it goes through the process without coming back. That's happened before. Or the land use committee can make the recommendation to be remanded, or if you will, deferred back to, for further consideration by the planning commission as a first step, such that the questions that we have and the concerns we have aren't bypassed, but are included in the process, ultimately getting to county council. So again, we have two choices here. I'll entertain a motion on either. We'll go with what we have. Unless there's some further comment prior to that request.
Just a quick clarification, Ed. If this goes to land committee,
A
They have-
denial, you're saying?
Correct.
Yes.
They have it within their purview to send it back to us. Is that what you just said?
That's my understanding. It's their decision.
No, I didn't know that. I thought you said it would go right to the commission.
No, it's up to the land use committee.
So it comes back to us regardless.
They may not, they may decide
It's a
not to.
risk.
It's
This
a
is the
risk.
whole
That's
thing
what
of
I'm,
risk
that's my
that we're
point,
dealing
it's a risk.
Okay,
Yeah.
I got you.
Am I correct in assessing this?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think occasionally I've seen that happen, but not very often.
Mhm.
Occasion you've seen it come back.
Yeah, where they've, asked for a rezoning to come back to planning commission and work further on it.
Usually if they say yes, it just goes to the commission,
To council.
the count, right?
Yeah, and I think, I'm trying to remember, and I think in most of those cases, it's something that is staff initiated, like we've been working on a new tree ordinance or something like that, and they, I don't know that I've seen it happen in a case like this, but that is a possibility
Yeah.
for them to remand it
So
back
the
to
safe
planning
route
commission.
is to grant the request of a deferral, is what you're saying.
I'm merely saying that the one advantage that I see is that it means that the planning commission could weigh in on the conversation, whatever changes are made to the,
Okay, thank
to
you.
the plan.
What motion do you want,
Well-
Mr. Chair?
It's what motion you want. What do you want to, it's a
Well, is it appro-
reconsideration of the,
Is it appropriate to move for reconsideration, or is it just appropriate to make a motion to defer it?
either is appropriate
Okay, let's make a motion to defer it.
for reconsideration of the vote.
Right.
All right? And do I have a second for that?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second for reconsideration of our prior denial of the deferral request of the ordinance amendment, ordinance mapping, zoning map amendment.
Did you say denial or do you mean approve?
Well, it was denied. We denied the deferral request in the first vote. The reconsideration is to
Yeah.
take
Meaning
another
the
vote on
failed
that
vote.
after we've had our discussion.
Not-
Okay,
not-
but it's an approval of deferral vote right now.
This is a reconsideration.
Reconsideration of the
Just a
original vote
reconsideration.
that failed.
It may
Yeah, I shouldn't
fail
say
again.
denied. Yeah.
Who knows?
Are we ready? Okay. All those in favor of the reconsideration to approve the deferral of the applicant's request till the December meeting, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. The motion
that-
passes.
I hate to be a stickler. Is that a motion to revisit the motion, or is that the actual motion to defer?
That was, my intent that was the actual motion to defer it.
Okay.
Until December. Good discussion, I mean, very pertinent issues and very, very thorough. So I think we've sent a message about what it is that we're looking for and what we expect in the December meeting, and we thank Mr. Johnson for being here and your patience with us as well.
My privilege, and I thank you for what I've learned tonight.
That's what's hanging, that's what.
We all learn something every time we're here.
Thank you for making it possible for us all to learn.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, with that, we'll move on, and we'll see you in December.
Excused. Good evening. Thanks, Rob.
All right, the next action item on is a text amendment to Article 1, General Provisions, Division 1.3, Section 1.3.50, exemptions of the Community Development Codes to provide exemptions to address county publics.
Let's do our eyes, like we have old eyes over here.
All right, a little bit of decorum and order here, please. Provide exemptions to address county public service uses. Ms. Merchant?
Yes, this is a little bit of an interesting case. For some of the members, this may seem a little familiar because this was brought to the Planning Commission at the January 6th, 2020 meeting. So this is,
Thought I'd say this
we were
before.
just hearing news about
Yeah.
COVID at that point, and it was some far off. So this is an interesting time. This is a provision in our, well, so I'll give you a real quick background of what happened. It went to the Planning Commission. Planning Commission voted, I think it was 6-2 to recommend to council. This amendment got to council. Council made a few changes, but then this was the we're just getting used to virtual meetings, and this was never properly ratified. So it went through 3 readings of county council with some additions that the planning commission didn't see, and that's what's highlighted in yellow here. But this entire provision is what's being brought forward for consideration of the county. So there's kind of an unusual history, but county council realized that we need to revisit this, go back through the process to make sure it gets adopted properly. So we look at this as one of the casualties of COVID, fortunately. If there's going to be casualties, I guess this is the kind we want to see. And sorry, that was a really stupid joke. So what this provision does is, and this is a provision that's in many zoning ordinances in South Carolina, but it allows the county, when there is a public use, a county use, to allow that use in a district that may not normally allow it with the zoning that it has. But what it requires is a public hearing. And this proposal, once it went to the county council, they recommended it follow 2 public hearings similar to a rezoning. So an example would be if the county wanted to build a fire station in a district, that otherwise, to meet ISO ratings, they found a site that's perfect to serve the community, but it's not allowed with the current zoning ordinance. This then would be sent to the planning commission to have a public hearing where they look at a site-specific proposal for this development. And then planning commission would make a recommendation to county council, and they would have a public hearing as well. The advantage of this, what you could argue, why don't they just go ahead and go through the rezoning process? But there are times where it might be appropriate for this specific county public use, but you don't want to go through a rezoning process that could open up that piece of land to other uses. So this would be very specific to a public use for the county. This provision, when the Planning Commission originally looked at this back in January of 2020, it only had county council holding a public hearing, and actually county council recommended that they add an extra layer and bring this to the Planning Commission. So we believe that this is a better version than what originally went to the Planning Commission. And, staff supports this idea because it still brings heavy public scrutiny to any public use that we're proposing, but it doesn't bring the baggage of a rezoning that could, in a case of, it could be an improvement that doesn't happen for some reason, and all of a sudden you have a piece of land that is zoned for that use. Or it might be an issue where rezoning doesn't really work because it's a spot zoning issue. But really, we're looking at a use that is needed for public safety reasons. That's kind of an overview of what's in here, and I'll entertain any questions that staff recommends.
Questions? Yeah.
I've
Dennis?
got just a couple, and maybe clarified in under the exemptions, under paragraph B, it just says, this may be exempt from the provisions of the development code when an emergency exists. What type of emergency does staff envision to where this is going to be an emergency type of situation where instead of going through the whole process of zoning? I understand what you just said, but to me, the way this verbiage says, it's we got to put this cell tower up right away, or else Meemaw won't be able to call her grandson somewhere. I'm just not real clear why that has to be in there like that, where it says an emergency exists. Is it an emergency, or is it just a streamlining process to get the public access?
Well, I guess it's a streamlined process, but it has 2 public hearings, and so the county would really be in a position to explain the emergency, and if there are any exemptions, that would come through when it's presented to the public.
So
it's leaving the provision open, but it's not writing a blank check, because it puts the county in a position where we need to explain to Planning Commission and County Council exactly why this facility is needed at this particular location.
okay, would there also be an issue with eminent domain at that point, if, like we said, it's an emergency condition, there's no rezoning, would the county have to go in at that time and say, we're gonna do this?
That would be an entirely different matter. So, I mean, it could be a piece of property the county already owns, or the county has an option to purchase.
Right.
So I don't know whether eminent domain is necessary in that case. If it's a real emergency, that's a possibility. I know the county really tries to avoid,
Right.
condemnation of property. But that action is separate than what's being considered here. That would be a different.
Other questions?
Yes.
Dan?
Rob, does
Yes,
staff recommend this change?
Yes, I mean, I think, I feel strongly, especially with the two public hearings, it allows the public to weigh in, puts the burden on the applicant. In a way, it's like a special use. The applicant has the burden to explain why it's an emergency, why it needs to locate in this location. So if it was a fire station, they might explain ISO ratings in a certain community, that it's needed in this location because this other community is underserved. That type of information would be required, from the county. Or any of, any information necessary to go through the process.
Other questions?
Sort of begs the question is there something in the pipeline that they're looking to do?
Well,
You keep saying fire station, so I'm envisioning a fire station somewhere.
That seemed to be the easiest, because
Yep.
I think public safety, and I think fire.
Yeah, good
Mr. Chuck
afternoon. I'm
Atkinson.
Chuck Atkinson, the Community Services Division Director for Beaufort County. So I want to point out that they can already do it. This is already law. This is on the books. So the only thing that is being considered tonight is the highlighted area. So County Council has said, this was considered, this was an excellent idea to add layers. And to your point, all of the questions that you were asking, Mr. Ross,
Just two of them.
but that's exactly the reason county council wants this in there, is to add that layer of scrutiny. And when you have those come through, you can ask those questions and add those layers of scrutiny and public involvement. So I just wanted to make the point, I don't know what's on the plan, but the county council wants us to come back and add this, to add those layers. It would seem to me if they wanted to do something, they would do it, because they already have the ability to do it unilaterally. And they're wanting to add this, to have those layers in place, just to involve the public and to have that additional scrutiny in place.
thank you.
I hope that answered your question.
Yeah,
I'm gonna move approval.
well, I'd like to ask a couple of questions first, or a couple
Oh,
of clarifications, that's all
Ask the
right.
questions after, my mistake. I'm learning.
Yeah. Mr. Merchant, I noted that the site plan will accompany the application for the emergency use of the property, correct?
And
The
I
County
apologize.
Public Services uses a site plan in accordance with the standards contained here and must be submitted and approved.
Yes, yes. So
So
it's
my
very
question-
similar to like a special use where, you're looking at.
Will we have an
site-specific.
opportunity to, or comment, or approve, or not approve, but recommendation on the site plan? Is that part of the second
Yeah.
hearing?
Yeah, all of that would be under consideration at the public hearing, because not only the question about whether this use should be permitted to locate here, but the details
Yeah.
of it as well, from what is
Well, the
submitted.
reason I ask that, because I believe currently we don't look at, we're not authorized to look, or we're not part of our process to look at the specifics of a development plan. That's,
Yeah, and this is not it's not a rezoning, it's actually a provision that's looking at a site-specific public service use.
and to the question about how often does this happen, I mean, are we expanding our agenda pretty significantly? I mean, are a number of cases come forward annually, or? No? I see Chuck shaking his head no.
I don't think so, because a lot of our zoning districts, I'm not saying everyone, but a lot of them do permit, they have a provision for government offices, government facilities, not all of them. So I would say that, in many cases, this is not going to make it to the planning commission because it's already permitted
Yeah.
use. They might have to go to the ZBOA for a special use or something like that. related to how it's permitted in the zoning district, but
Yeah.
not the planning commission.
Well, as you know, we've always been advocates of full transparency and allowing the public to speak. And so this takes that action into consideration. There are two things in the underlying portion, though, that would help to further clarify. You talk about 15 days' notice. Is that business or calendar?
It's calendar,
Okay?
yeah, just
does-
like we do notice for
All right.
rezoning.
And you also mentioned that it'll be published in a newspaper. Will it be online on the website as well? Publish that notification?
It would be done the same way we do notification for a public hearing for the planning commission.
Okay, so full
Yeah.
transparency online as well.
Mhm.
Okay,
Just a minor point, where it says, the Beaufort County Comprehensive Plan upon the Public Planning Commission's recommendation be received and is crossed out, the T should be a small t.
Okay.
Very small.
Yeah,
okay.
Otherwise, it looks like it's another sentence, so.
okay. So sometimes you do these underlined strike-throughs and.
Yeah, it'll get changed before it gets signed, believe me. Okay, any further discussion up here? If not, can I have a motion on the request for a text amendment to Article 1, Division 1.3?
So moved.
I'd like to, if you would state the full motion, the length of the motion,
I'm
just so
sorry.
for the record.
Yeah, for the record. We recommend approval.
I move to recommend approval, I move the approval of section 1.3.50 of the amendment, and I don't know exactly what else you want me to say.
Well, the Community Development Code to provide
Oh,
exemptions.
redevelopment code, thank you.
Yeah, the title of it, to provide exemptions to address county public services uses.
That's what I said.
Okay,
Second.
all right, we have a motion and a second for approval. All those in favor of the motion? Any not? No, unanimous approval? Second by,
Mr. Rydell, I think.
yeah, I think Dan seconded that, yes. Okay, let's go on to our final item, comprehensive plan amendment to add the Beaufort County Housing Impact Analysis and an appendix to the 2040 comprehensive plan.
Alrighty, good evening. So in 2023, South Carolina General Assembly amended their code and created Act 57, which allows the ATAX to be eligible to support workforce housing. The new law allows up to 15% of both state and local ATAX to be used to support workforce housing for those earning between 30% and 120% of area median income. However, to enable this, the county must complete and adopt a housing impact analysis to the comprehensive plan. This analysis was just completed, and I have Ms. Tammy here to present.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm gonna share my screen here, and please let me know if you cannot see this, because I will be sharing the presentation remotely. So I apologize, I can't be there with you in person. I know I tried to get this on the schedule, but then Debbie got in all of our ways with the storm. So I do apologize that we didn't get this in front of you sooner, but excited to be here. I think I'm just going to kind of go through the housing impact analysis. As you probably saw, is about 60-something pages, so it's pretty in-depth based on workforce housing and affordable housing and how it aligns with the needs in Beaufort County. But it was really already stated, what occurred thanks to Senator Tom Davis last year who introduced this bill to support workforce housing. We actually got this passed to support additional opportunities and additional funding sources that were not previously eligible to support workforce housing opportunities in the community. And so, as mentioned, one of their main requirements in actually being able to access the percentage of funding for workforce housing is to amend the comprehensive plan to add the housing impact analysis. So that was actually a part of the actual Act 57 that required this particular analysis. A little bit more about it. I think that, was stated specifically it's what's defined in the act is exactly what was just mentioned, that for the purposes, I know that sometimes we see different definitions for workforce and affordable housing, but it does include the percentage of 30% to 120% of the area median income. Now, obviously, we know that changes annually. That is published every year by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And so when we think about that, it is tied to that, and that is indicated in the actual legislation. And again, it's capped at up to 15% of the local government's annual collections, both for the local and then for the state as well. This legislation does sunset unless it is renewed. So after December 31st, 2030, it would no longer be in effect unless it was extended or renewed or put in place in perpetuity. So just so you know, we've got about 6 years or so to utilize this resource for workforce housing. And then again, as mentioned earlier, before the local government entity can utilize the state accommodations tax, we have to complete this housing impact analysis and have it adopted as an amendment to the comprehensive plan. So, again, the housing impact analysis also has to be shared and presented to several different entities as part of the requirement of the legislation. In addition to updating and amending the comprehensive plan, it also has to be obviously adopted per ordinance by council, which would be once it's amended by you all, added to the comp plan, but it also has to be notified. A notification has to go to the Department of Revenue, as well as the Tourism and Expenditure Review Committee. They also must receive this as well. So once the housing impact analysis is approved, moves forward, it would also be notified to them as well. We also must, as I mentioned, ratify this as part of the comp plan. We also share it with local builders, developers, and partners in the community. Fortunately, a lot of those individuals actually provided input on this analysis. So we worked with the Realtors Association in the region and some of the local builders to actually get some of this data and analysis. I'm just trying to get to the next slide. And this is actually in the legislation, and at the end of the housing impact analysis is the full legislation that was adopted. But really what it sums up is that we have to really make the nexus between workforce housing needs and the local economy that we're trying to address. And so the goal is to, in this analysis, share the cost of development, the cost of rehabilitation, a discussion around the fair market value of existing homes, financing and purchasing and developing housing, some of those costs. We also want to talk about what the county is already doing related to workforce and affordable housing as it relates to maybe some of the barriers associated with the development of workforce and affordable housing. And then, of course, just how this particular resource and analysis, supports low and moderate income households. The goal of the assessment of the analysis is actually just to provide reasonable estimates of housing costs. And so this is explicit language, obviously, from the requirement just for you all. And certainly, I'm sure you'll saw this in the legislation and obviously can get this presentation. It gave us a couple ways to do it. One was we could actually identify some specific development projects and put like budgets in there and examples in there. But as you know, the county is very different depending on where you're building. If there's a specific homeownership project versus a rental project. And so it allowed us to just talk generally about housing costs, provide brief descriptions and analysis about all different types of housing that could be developed. And so again, there was really no structure or specific outline in which was outlined in the analysis, except to answer some of these questions as it relates to the construction and development of both rental housing and single-family homeownership housing as well. So as you'll see in the full report, this is a point-in-time analysis. So you will note that we used not only information from the comp plan, but also information from past previous housing studies in the community, the Boeing study, which was a big needs assessment that was done by the county a couple of years ago, in addition to kind of current market data, information from the Realtors Association, the Home Builders Association, and even, as I mentioned, one-on-one interviews and discussions with local builders and developers that provided some guidance. But the analysis looks primarily at the housing market challenges, the costs associated with increased real estate prices, as we've seen, the cost burden of local employees, depending on what employment sector they're in, and really the imbalance between the housing costs and incomes. The overall goal of the housing impact analysis is to really just show this demand for workforce housing, how local employees are cost burdened due to the acceleration in housing cost, and of course, how the county is already working to address some of those barriers as well. So the report is really organized in these 6 sections. One is obviously the population analysis. 2 was around economic and employment analysis. So what's kind of happening in the economy, the employment sector. 3 was really looking at the housing market and its conditions. 4 was really looking at construction and development costs. So what is actually causing maybe some of the costs associated with housing, not only just land, but also development costs. And then the last one was really around, what's happening around removing barriers to developing more housing and how the county is actually addressing some of those already. So just high level, because I know you don't have all night for me to go over 65 pages of the housing impact analysis, although I know it's interesting reading. But one of the things that we really wanted to look at in trying to tell this story of why this accommodations tax funding could be beneficial to the county. And again, it allows the county to use the funding. That will be a budget and county council decision of how much funding would be allocated and what types of programs and projects that they might use the funding for. This just enables the county to now access this source for a different use that wasn't previously eligible. So I just want to make that clear. It doesn't dictate how the county would use the funds or when the county would use the funds or if they would use it, but just enabling them the opportunity to. So we wanted to look at the population growth. And obviously we know there's a lot of growth in Beaufort County. We're seeing that not only in the county, but in the surrounding area, and just how that's impacting, as you all know, supply and demand. So as more people come to the community, inventory is low, building hasn't kept up with the population growth. Even in the Boeing study, we saw that anticipated increases by 2027 would be, about a 225,000 population. Already, recent numbers are showing, you're well over 200,000 population. And so we see that escalating, which is going to further put pressure on the housing demand, especially for the workforce in the community. The second, the second kind of chapter was around economic and employment analysis. The goal here was to really start to pull out and look at some of the employment sectors, the key employment sectors in the community, which we know that hospitality still remains one of the top employment sectors in Beaufort County. Obviously, between leisure and hospitality, arts and entertainment, it still is one of the largest employment sectors, and as well as we know, military is still a high employment. So we looked at that, just looking at food, accommodations, retail, healthcare. Those are all obviously high growth employment sectors, and just understanding that 35% in the hospitality community, in many cases, earn not enough to afford just an average apartment or an average house. You can see here with the wages on the second graphic on the bottom, those accommodations, food, still remain pretty low compared to other employment sectors. And so as housing costs continue to escalate, just trying to find a way to match that up. And so one of the requirements is to really create that nexus between, here's a high population in this particular employment sector who earn some of the lowest wages, and our housing costs continue to escalate. So how are we going to balance that? This is there is a national organization called the National Housing Conference. It's actually one of the largest industry indicators, and they do an analysis every year to kind of identify paycheck to paycheck, they call it, which is, what do I need to earn if I live in Beaufort County to afford kind of the average or market rate apartment, or sort of what they consider the average house. And so this just shares with you that households need to earn $172,000 to afford sort of the average home in Beaufort County. We know this is a moving target. This report, obviously was a couple of months ago, and that continues to change. And then over $46,000 to afford a 3-bedroom apartment. So what we try to do here is just share with you in a snapshot sort of the rental market, what like a cook, a waitress, a housekeeping person, someone in the motel, hotel, sort of desk clerk, sort of some of those positions would actually need to afford, or what they make versus what they would need to afford for like a rental apartment. Obviously, the report goes into more detail. It also highlights other employment sectors as well, but just to give you a snapshot as it relates to this particular area. And then the same is true for homeownership. So when we look at homeownership, again, what's needed, if you had a 3% or 10% down payment, 3% down payment, what you would need to earn as a household. And this is based on, not spending more than 30% of your income on housing. And that's really what we consider, if you spend more than that, it's just considered cost burden. And then again, you can see what those same positions currently earn. And so getting homeownership access is very difficult for these particular employees. Then we looked at just housing market conditions. And again, this is a snapshot just to kind of also share with you, how are you comparing to the region and the market? We know that Beaufort County continues to grow. I heard earlier today about Bluffton and the islands, and of course there are certain constraints associated with development in the community that we can't control in terms of topography. But according to the COG recent indicators report, a 2-bedroom apartment in 2023 that showed that basically you needed to earn $58,000 to afford that. That's if you're making about $28 an hour. We recognize that a lot of our hospitality workers and accommodations workers are not making that. And so this just kind of shares with you kind of who's cost burden in the community, and it also compares what Colleton, Hampton, and Jasper. So although we know that those communities are growing as well with more population growth, we still see that a lot of folks in Beaufort County are cost burden, which means they're having to make difficult choices between their housing and other things that they need. This graph is pretty straightforward. Housing affordability has decreased over time in the county, and this just kind of gives you the projection on how it's changed over time. Similarly, when it comes to homeownership, that slide was more about rental. Just looking again at the percentage of folks that are cost burdened who would try to buy a home. We saw recently the median sales price increase over 8% to almost $500,000, which obviously can get very expensive in the marketplace. And then again, some of those are even more expensive as well. And so you can see here this sort of historical median sales price continuing to accelerate over the years. So again, identifying funding sources and opportunities to increase workforce affordable housing, as a goal in the comp plan and the housing element, this would be a resource that would hopefully help support, organizations and developers that are doing affordable housing. And that would be really up to council and the county to decide who that is and how they use those funds. But this just shares with you kind of where homeownership challenges are. The other thing that the housing impact analysis and the legislation asked us to look at was just overall construction costs. Because one of the things that we want to try to do is how do we remove these barriers and remove these costs, and are there things that we can be doing to address that? And there's certain things that are in our control as counties and cities and community members, but there's a lot of things that are not, which is the cost of construction. So whether it be labor costs, material costs, things like that, things that we know have accelerated, especially post-COVID. In addition, we recognize that land costs are high. We heard from some developers that said, you know, it could be as much as $500,000 an acre in some communities. Especially we know in Beaufort County in particular, we have the limitation because of environmental concerns, as well as, you know, there's certain areas that can't be developed, nor should they be developed. And so we recognize that then, again, a supply and demand issue where there's limited land or limited developable land. And so that also increases the cost. And so just understanding what those costs are so we can better understand what are some strategies around that. And then the last section, again, I mentioned the legislation asks us to look at is, you know, how can we remove barriers to create more workforce housing in our community to meet this growing demand of this workforce that may earn a little bit less than others and really are important and critical to our community. And the county's already doing things, and you all know this because you created the comprehensive plan. This is some of the development code. There's some density bonus initiatives that the county is implementing. You guys have looked at your impact fees and provided some resources for that. So county council has already been doing a lot around this issue. They really were instrumental, as you know, in helping to establish the Beaufort Jasper Housing Trust Fund, which is another resource and tool now in the community. So again, the county is already doing some things to not only promote and produce more affordable housing, but also to look to preserve the housing that's already there. So again, that's kind of the last chapter of the book. It's sort of like a book, right? And so what we're asking for you tonight to do is, as part of the legislation, Act 57, that would now allow and create accommodations tax as an eligible use for workforce housing in the county, if the council were so desired to do so, is to adopt this housing impact analysis as part of the comprehensive plan amendment to then enable accommodations tax revenue to support these types of initiatives and meet these needs.
Good. Is that the end of it? Are we ready for us, for questions? Questions?
Okay, so the beginning of it says that we need to amend the comprehensive plan in order to put the HIA as an attachment, I guess. But then it said later that you needed an ordinance for the HIA, and I was confused by that a little bit.
Yeah, the council, so the housing impact, so as part of the process in which to adopt it as an amendment to the comprehensive plan, and then the county council will need to adopt it as well. But it needs to go by whatever governing body that the process is for the county. So as planning commission, you adopt the comprehensive plan. This is amendment to the comprehensive plan. This would then be a part of the comprehensive plan, and then the county would still have to go to council, full council, to adopt this as well, to actually utilize accommodations tax for workforce housing.
So the council would have to adopt it as an ordinance. Correct?
I think so.
Yes, I'll let Robert speak to, that process.
Yeah, I mean, that's the method of how they adopt it. It would be an appendix to the comprehensive plan, but they have it's adopted as an ordinance.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean it's like a zoning ordinance. It's
Yeah.
the mechanism they use to adopt it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I was wondering, okay.
Yeah, thank you for that, Robert.
Other questions?
How is it received to the variety of stakeholder groups that you worked with? I think there's a list of 9 or 10 of them.
I mean, really well. I think that there, I will just say to you that a lot of folks in the community have seen this as an opportunity for an eligible source because of the nexus between, our community being so heavily accommodations and tourism related, seeing this as a really great opportunity to create more workforce housing, create additional, as you guys may or may not know, federal funds, state funds, some of these funding sources that counties like Beaufort can access have a lot of restrictions, a lot of limitations, and how they can be used. This is going to be the county's money that they can have more flexibility. If they want to use it to support habitat in a certain project, if they want to use it for a rental project that's really important, So the community was very positive about this because this is a source that the county can control, not the federal government, not the state government. Obviously, once it's passed and it's a local resource, then you guys can prioritize it the way you see fit. And so it was very positive.
A quick follow-up. So in your opinion, does the county having this plan embedded in, the community development code enhance the county's prospects for getting federal funding? I didn't hear a lot about federal in this, and then you just said it kind of avoids federal. So could you enlighten me a little bit?
Yeah, I can expand on that. So I think it does a couple things. It's because it's a local tax that's already being collected. What this allows is for the county to now use it for workforce housing, in addition to what it's already legislative allowed to use, like for tourism related events or marketing for the county and things like that. Because it's local, it's not controlled by any federal agency, right? Like Department of Housing, Urban Development as well. And so it creates another resource that's a little bit more flexible. But what it could do, to your point, is because the county is setting aside this resource for workforce housing, it might leverage other funding sources. So for example, if you have a project and you're trying to leverage some other private resource or bank resource or tax credits, or they'll see, wow, the county's set this money aside for workforce housing. They're really serious about this, and so this creates another financing leveraging tool for other funds to maybe come to the community that would not normally have come.
Thanks, that's exactly what I was asking.
Other questions?
How often does the HIA have to be updated?
It's a one-time adoption, and then of course, unless they change the legislation, Act 57, which is to sunset in 2030. The goal of it was to do housing impact analysis as part of allowing it to be used. At this stage, there's been no other amendments to Act 57 to indicate that this would need to be updated, and of course, this is going to be a part of your 2040 plan.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment to your question. Excellent question, because it is a dated document in such that, the data goes back to 2018, and it's a projection based on studies that were done even prior to the creation of Act 57 in 2023. So I would, and the conditions for, as everybody knows, for affordable housing are just atrocious, and they're getting worse. The market is just not tolerating at affordable housing conditions, with short-term rentals on the increase, with inflationary pricing. I mean, there's a whole host of issues that need to be tackled with this. I would like to make a recommendation that this be updated periodically as part of the comprehensive plan updates. We update every 5 years, and so that'll be coming forward in 2025. And just a statement of the current conditions and of the progress, if any, that we're able to make from one period to the next. I'm a big advocate on strategic planning. This is a statement of conditions with some analysis, some restatement of the direction that the county has begun to take based on this comprehensive work in the 2040 plan. But the conditions change. There's a condition here we touched on tonight where the county doesn't have the ability to require affordable housing as part of the development, but it seeks it in the development plan and ultimate approval. I would like them to rethink that issue and whether or not it's time. Certainly our local economy is dependent on getting skilled workers, getting people, everyone who wants to live here or who is living here, the ability to stay here and to make a home and a family here. I think it's an excellent document. I did read every page thoroughly, several times. It's in the news constantly at the local, state, and federal level. And it's an issue that we need to pay very close attention to and not put it as a static document that met a requirement for a funding source. I'd like it to be an active part of any comprehensive plan update in terms of a strategic planning, as we've learned as we go with all the operations that we put in place. That's my speech. Any other comments or questions?
just got two real brief ones, and they're very easy. You said the community received this very well, and I can understand that. Like Ed, I read through it a couple times myself. The question that I had was, the Beaufort Housing Authority presented with this? Did you get a cut from them or what they thought of? Because they're very, particularly down in our neck of the woods, where I live down Ladies Island, St. Helens Island. It's a very rural area, and there are protective orders down there that prevent a lot of workforce housing. But there was even a discussion by Councilman Glover back in the spring about affordable housing and how it could be impacted in that area. So did you get a buy-in from those folks on this at all?
Yeah, well, I do know Julie. I know Julie's new. She's the new Beaufort
Right.
County Housing Authority Director, and so we have had conversations. Again, we have I've not presented this to her. Obviously, this is your document, but I had talked with her about developments, and I think she was coming on board right when we were kind of wrapping this up. But I definitely got feedback from, and also had met with their board chair. I can't think of his name right at the top of my head, but yeah, because I don't know if you realize, but the Community Foundation of the Low Country, Scott Weirman has pulled a group together called the Low Country Housing Partners. They hosted a symposium last year. They're planning on hosting another symposium this year in November. And so some of those folks are folks that, we obviously got feedback from. The Low Country Council of Governments obviously does their indicators report. But to your point, no, I think this would be a great tool for folks to have as access as well. But no, Julie was just kind of coming on board with that, but I definitely have spoken to her.
Okay.
But I have not necessarily, I didn't feel like it was my document to hand over to her at this point, but certainly once the county feels good about it and you all feel good about it, I think it could be widely shared. And it would be obviously a part of the comp plan.
Okay. One last thing, and it's maybe a Scrivener's error on page 45. It talks under the impact fees. There's a sentence down that says the following table indicates the percentage of discount available for impact fees for affordable housing, and it's blank.
Okay, I'll double check that. Thank you.
Sure.
What page was it?
Page 45.
Okay. I'll double check. And either one, maybe in printing, or two, maybe it somehow did disappear. So I'll double check that. Thank you.
Sure.
Other questions? Yeah, go
I
ahead.
have a quick question. Is there a strategy for disseminating this document? I also found it extremely well-written, and also it dove down so much. I mean, to the point that you have a differential in the amount that a bartender makes and the amount that a waitstaff person makes, or somebody who does dishwashing. I mean, it was really fantastic, I thought. So thanks a lot for that. Personal little issue, thanks so much for bringing up the issue of short-term rentals, which, are going to continue to be a scourge in our community and does take away rental property, whatever. But my question is there a strategy for disseminating it? Like, will the county, and maybe this is to Rob, you've dealt with all of the usual stakeholders, right? The usual suspects. How can somebody, again, to go back to your word of leverage, use this document if he or she or a family or a company or a partnership is going to come forward with some ideas of affordable housing? How are you going to educate people that this exists? Is there a strategy for dissemination or for, I don't know, just letting people know, like getting the public involved?
I mean, I'm happy to share ideas, Rob. I think,
I mean, they can download it, right? People can download it.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be obviously a part of, it is an amendment to the comp plan, so it would be now, I think, probably an attachment to that, but I don't want to speak for Chuck and Robert on, what their goals are, but, certainly I think it becomes a public document once it is approved and then obviously passed by council. So I think however you normally would disseminate, but certainly, again, whether it's beneficial to have it, shared with community partners in some form or fashion, I'm happy to support whatever Robert thinks is best.
Yeah, and I would just echo, being part of the comprehensive plan, it allows us then to use that information, and that the advantage would be if we're applying for grant funds, it's information available. As far as proactively disseminating the information, I would say I just haven't put a lot of thought into that yet. I think we're looking at right now getting this adopted so that we can, be able to use accommodation tax funds for affordable housing, but certainly,
I mean, I think
I'm
like a news
interested
story,
in-
a story that like now you can use some of these ATAX funds.
Mhm.
Because mostly I think people, dumb people like me think ATAX, okay, that's heads and beds,
yeah.
So
yeah.
this is, I think, a kind of a radical departure that
Mhm.
deserves some understanding, and I don't know if you want to post it on the website, and that someone who doesn't want to download the entire comp plan can just do these 45 pages.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
very, very well written and put together. I think a bunch of
Mhm.
us here have read it several times, and I'm like really not the right person to read this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I was very well educated, so thank you again.
And I can mention that to our public information officer
Yeah.
as well, because this will be going on to the Land Use Committee on Monday.
when it-
And, I think there's an opportunity to
There is an
do
opportunity.
some
yeah.
bragging, so. and
Absolutely,
get the
there's a good
information out there.
communications option here.
Okay.
All right, if there are no further questions, there are further questions. I'd like to have a motion on this particular recommendation.
Excuse me, I do,
Do you have a question?
yes, something, I think it's a great document. I agree with Ed's statement about affordable housing being needed. And I see this document, which is very informative, as being something of value for us to know. And it also makes funds available. But the two questions I have, and I hope I can word them correctly, because obviously today I've not been successful in wording things correctly. One is, to take ATAX money means that other sources that are using that ATAX, other entities or groups that are using that ATAX money will not have it available to them. So it's taking from Peter to pay Paul. And I don't know if that's advantageous as much as it is that this may give us give people the ability to apply for grants and to get additional funding. But I think we have to keep in mind that we're just spreading a finite pot in more directions, which could be detrimental. It's one of those, what do they say, unintended consequences
Yeah.
that we have to be aware of. And I guess the other thing is, going back, again, echoing, I guess, what Ed said, is how does this help get more money, really? What value does it have aside from disseminating additional information to people about the cost of housing? What value does the document have? Because it doesn't mandate a certain percentage of developments be for affordable housing. It doesn't do anything except provide information to people, making people feel how difficult it is for a lot of the people who work here to afford housing. I think we should let them know. But I'm very confused as to what's so important about this document. What's it going to do to bring in affordable housing without being detrimental to
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
things?
Let me see if I can answer your first question. It's the job of county council to distribute the funds from ATAX. And they go into a very careful deliberation process through their committee and in the county council action to both approve a total amount and to distribute that amount among a number of different petitioners. And most often, the petitioning is greater than the amount that can be given. So there is the trade-offs, and that is the job of our elected officials to decide how those funds will be appropriated. As to the meaning of the document, it's required at the state level. And so it is a mandated, if you want any access to these funds, this is something you must have. For me, it puts it all in one place. It puts it very frankly, very upfront. The comprehensive plan is our key document. I'm hoping that it will get the continued attention and be more than a static document that was required to initiate the process, and that the strategic steps that we're taking now will be refined in consideration of what the data tells us, where the opportunities are, and what the funding availability. This is, it's not going to be a lot of dollars to solve the problem, whether it gets into their, low millions, that's great. I don't know how much it's being handed out in that 15%. But it's another tool in our toolbox, and we certainly need every tool we can.
Thank you.
Do you want to say something? Chuck, please.
Sure. So as everyone has already mentioned, affordable housing is a very complex issue. A lot of moving parts, a lot of things that have ushered in what I'm going to call the affordable housing crisis began 25 years ago. So when we talk about solving the issues, it is a very forward-looking topic, right? We have to look out 10, 15, 20 years. This is not something we're going to solve in 6 months. So how do we use this information? It is a planning tool. And one strategy that Beaufort County has done a good job with is leveraging funds, building partnerships, whether it is with our municipal friends, whether it's with the state or even the federal government. So having this information so that we're not talking about hypotheticals, but we have specific factual data to work with helps us as we formulate those long-range plans. And this is one step among many other steps that we're taking with the Housing Trust Fund, with using impact fees, with using other sources of funds to combat the affordable housing issue, along with, as you're all familiar with, land planning, densities, things of that nature. So when I look at this plan, it's factual information that grounds us where we are now so that when we look forward 10, 15, 20 years, we remove a number of hypotheticals. We know where we are, we can identify specific targets to reach, and that helps us over the long term to sort of tackle the problem. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Well, I agree with everything you just said, but 15 years from now, 10 years from now, you'll get back to making sure that they update the plan so that you have new information that helps you going forward for the following 20 years.
Yeah, I have every impression that we will be updating this plan.
Okay.
Every other component that we have, I mean, there's no mandate that we do it, but every other component that we utilize, we update those on a cyclical basis, and I can't imagine that this would be any different.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's gonna help us
Yeah.
figure out whether we've accomplished our goals moving forward, and yeah, absolutely, I can't foresee a plan like this not being updated periodically.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Other questions? Okay. Without, there being no further questions, do I have a motion regarding the comprehensive plan amendment that would include the housing impact analysis appendix?
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we recommend to the county council to add the Beaufort County Housing Impact Analysis as an appendix to the 2040 comprehensive plan, including a recommendation that updates be considered in concert with all required comp plan updates. And this motion is based on the established review standards that were outlined in the staff report, as well as the testimony given this evening.
Second.
Did you second, Glenn? Okay. We have a motion. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion? All those not in favor? Okay, it's unanimous approval in favor of it. Motion passes.
Great motion.
All right, I think that's it, gang. All right, that's the last.
you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time.
Gotta sign off. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
We have one last item. The only chairman's report item I have is that we're approaching the last quarter. It's 3 months to get your training requirements in. So please, if you have a need for training, reach out to me or anybody who's in the know about training. In fact, there's an opportunity that John just brought to our attention this evening. And do you want to state what that is, or do you want to let all
Sure,
that?
I was gonna ask Rob, oh, there you are. If you were familiar with this, I'd gotten an email about the Low Country Regional Public Works Training Conference coming up on the 26th of September.
Yeah, I got that too.
And it looks like it's got tracks that include roadway, stormwater, and environmental.
Wow, okay.
And it sounded like, I'll give you a copy of this.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that. So,
Yeah, it sounded like if it's something that's open to the public, that it would be a great opportunity for some of us to hear from those that are
Yeah.
actually making decisions regarding roadway, stormwater, environmental, so that we're
Yeah, and these
better
are all,
educated.
you know, very related to planning, and so I think it kind of helps to see how other, you know, related departments in the county that we work very closely with, you know,
John,
how they do things.
John, does it say anything about getting credit for it?
That's what, no, I'm gonna call them tomorrow. I didn't see it on my email.
This is,
And it's only an hour, right, John? 12:30 to 1:30?
8 AM to 3 PM.
Oh, then
Yikes.
you're absolutely right.
And this is our Public Works Department? Or is this?
Low Country Regional Public Works Training Conference,
Huh,
hosted by the Beaufort Regional Civil Engineers Club and the Low Country branch of the South Carolina chapter of the American Public Works Association.
Say that fast.
yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't even say it fast.
Well, we'll find out more about it. So there's an opportunity there, and there are many other opportunities if you reach out to the South Carolina Association for Planning Commission and other departments. They're constantly being promoted. So, any other items that you want to discuss at this time? Okay. Without there being any objections, I declare this meeting adjourned.